It's time for Soul Patch Reviews.
Yeah. So, Kev, what do you got for us today? What have you been watching lately?
A lot actually, but the this one is I like I talked about last time with the red sleeve. I love sageuk. I really enjoy the Korean history shows, and even though they're not good listening practice, they are just fun, and they do get me into the history of the country a little bit. So I watched my wife and I found a slightly older show here, and this one is called Chuno, Chuno.
Okay.
Although the English title, I've seen the English title sometimes just as Chuno, or it's also known as just The Slave Hunters is the
Mm.
official title. And this actually came out in 2010.
Oh,
So
okay. So
it's
this is back a
yeah,
little bit. Okay.
this one's a little bit old. The reason we wanted to watch it actually is because Jang is the main actor in it. And I saw him in another historical drama from a couple years ago. I saw it was called Nai Nara, My Country. And I don't remember enough about that show to talk about it, so we'll save the review there. But I loved his role in that. I loved his acting. He was playing like King Sejong's grandfather before he was like as a prince at the time in that drama. And I just loved this guy. Like he's just a fantastic actor. And so my wife was like, "You really liked him. Let's find another drama." And Chuno, this drama is pretty. This was pretty famous. I mentioned to like my in-laws at the time, like, "Oh yeah, we're watching Chuno." And they're like, "Oh, that was a great one." I mentioned to my friends, like, this show was pretty big a few years ago, and this was based in probably the 1600s, like mid 1600s, I believe. And unlike Red Sleeve, this one is not based on a true story at all. It's
Okay.
based on true events at the time. Like the king at the time was the real king that they had.
Yeah.
There were some like intrigues that the show mentioned about like the king's successors. Is it going to be this person or this person? But that was all like subplots, and that was just kind of giving it its place in history.
Hmm.
Whereas the main story of what the characters are doing, that's just a completely made up thing. Um, so there wasn't as much Wikipedia searching for this one as there was
Right.
with Red Sleeve.
But this one is still based in a fictional reality, right? I mean, like a
No,
historical
it's
fictional reality. Like there were, it's not fantasy. There's not.
right. So not factual, not fictional.
It's not. Sorry, factional. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fact. This is a fact. Yeah, it's based in real life. It's based in what was happening at the time in Korea. So, for example, the show is called The Slave Hunters, right? And the idea behind the show is because at this point in Korean history, slavery was still going big. Like there were lots of slaves
Hmm.
in Korea. Actually, if we look at the Red Sleeve, that king, I think Jungjo, going back to the last episode, he was kind of one of the kings to abolish slavery, or at least work towards doing so. I'm not sure if it actually happened at the time. So that
Yeah.
was like 100 years
Another
after
reason
Chuno.
to like that guy.
Yeah, yeah, he's a great king.
Yeah.
So the slave hunters, basically, their story, the main character, Jang Hyuk, his Daegil was his character, and he and his small crew were slave hunters, which basically means if slaves ran away from their masters, then slave hunters would be hired by the state or whatever to go out and hunt them down and bring them back, basically.
Hmm.
And that was their job. And so it's a show about him, but it starts off almost as like a love story. He The main character originally was like a Yangban. He was like an aristocrat at the time, and then shit goes down, and he lost his um, aristocrat privileges,
Hmm.
status. But he had been in love with his slave at the time, and so that's why he becomes a slave hunter, because they get separated through like all the drama and things that go down. And so he becomes a slave hunter to find his previous slave, who was not really a slave to him. It was more his love, the love of his life. And so he's trying to find her throughout this drama. And again, without too many spoilers, because I would generally recommend this show for people. It's a bit old, but it's a fun one to watch. He does end up finding her, but things don't work out the way that you would expect them to. Um, I will say for this drama, this is a fun one. I we really enjoyed it. The acting is great. There's some amazing characters. There really are just some great characters. The main character, Daegil, played by Jung Hyuk, his character is just great. And he's kind of dealing with this. He used to be an aristocrat, got kicked out. His life was basically stripped from him. Now he's this slave hunter, and so he's in this, like, he kept calling this Jira Katen Seisang. It's like this fucked up life, basically, is what he's saying. And so he's just cynical towards life and everything, but he's out there still trying and searching for the love of his life in this, and then the things that happen around that.
So when this slavery is, it's not a one-to-one to like the American version of slavery.
It wasn't racial based at all.
It was class based, right? It was the peasantry or something like that.
No, these were actual slaves. So this was different. I mean, there were peasants at the time, and there were, like middle class. And I mean, I don't know how much of a middle class there was, but there were still poor people. There were still, like the working class. There were the aristocrats, and then there were the slaves. And it wasn't racial based like it was in the States. They were still Koreans. Yeah. But they were slaves, and they were definitely a slave class. So, like if they had a child in slavery, the child was also a slave, and the story deals with that actually as well. There's a couple of stories actually going on. So there's the main character, the main story, and they all come together, of course. Sure. But there's the main story with Daegil and his friends being slave hunters and going around. Then there's a story about a slave group, kind of like a mini slave rebellion that happens at the time. Then there's a story of some aristocrats, and here's where it really falls into the Korean style genre of dramas, because like so many dramas, and I'm sure we'll see this in more, but even like Squid Game, it's talking about how there is so much corruption at the elite level. Mm-hmm. And so this is the same thing, where the aristocrats at the time were just abusing power and abusing people and abusing money for their own gain. And so there's that story. So there's a political message, an overarching political message. Yeah, at the time.
But how do you reconcile the hero being a slave catcher? A slave hunter.
Actually, that's an interesting question, and you're right, because I mean he's working, he's bringing slaves back, and of course slavery is bad. Yeah. What's really interesting is actually probably I'll go ahead and give this spoiler because it's like in episode 1 or 2. It's really early on. It starts off of him and his crew catching some slaves, and they basically catch a family of slaves that are wandering away. And by the way, the fight scenes in this show are epic. They're really good. Jung Hyuk, that dude must have actually studied some hardcore martial arts. I mean, he's ripped, and he does his own stunts. You can tell, at least for many of them. He's badass. So it starts off, the whole show basically starts off with this crazy fight scene of him catching these slaves and hauling them back. And of course they're just like, no, please, don't take us back. My mom is gonna like, there's like it's like a family of slaves. And so he takes them back. He's like, look, I don't care about you. You slaves, you're dirt, blah, blah, blah. And so he takes them back. But then in either the end of that episode or maybe the second episode, I don't remember exactly, as it shows that family of slaves now back in their master's house, and they're being, beaten and punished for having run away. Suddenly, a Korean ninja of some kind, I don't know what the word they use, I should learn this, the old style, but like, he's dressed up all in black, he's got the ninja clothes, and he like breaks into the the noble's house where this family was being abused and everything. And it's like the nighttime, and he like breaks in and like punches the Yangban and like steals their money and goes and like basically takes the slaves, the slaves that he had just captured, or that were just captured, takes them out, and he's like, here, and he's like, and he gets them out of the castle, and then he pulls down his mask, and you see that it is Daegil. It's the same character that had just captured them not too long ago.
Oh, okay. So he has a change of heart then.
Kind of, because he's never been a bad guy, but this is how he's done it before. And so then he's got them out, and he like throws the money that he got, like because he robbed them as well. He took money from the noble family, and he took them, and he's like, he throws money at them. He's definitely not a nice guy. He's still not a nice character. Right. Yeah. He's a good character, but not a nice character. So he like throws the money at him, and he's like, go here to this mountain. I know some people, they'll be safe. And they're like, oh, thank you. And he's just like, whatever. And he just walks away from him. Like, he doesn't really care. Like, he's not doing it because he's a good guy, or he's doing it because he's a good guy, but not a nice guy.
But he has a conscience. I
Right.
mean, and that's
He exactly. He has a conscience. So he's in this, crazy situation, this crazy world where everyone is against everyone else. And he's living within the constraints of the world, and slavery is a thing. You can't
hmm
fight against slavery, but he's kind of doing it in his own way.
yeah.
And so then you start to realize, like, very early on, like, even though he's a slave hunter, he's not a bad guy, right? And so you are able to
Yeah.
connect with him as a character. um the Just a couple of things to kind of wrap up for here. Again, the action in this drama was fantastic, which
Yeah.
really connects me to the soundtrack of this, because like some Korean dramas, especially older ones, I think they have the same song playing again and again and again and again and again
Yeah.
throughout the course of the drama. So like every fight scene was this song, and every kind of like heartfelt scene was this song, and every fight scene with another one of the characters was a different song. And so my wife and I have actually played the soundtrack a couple of times, and I can get back into feeling what was happening at it. So I actually would recommend check out the soundtrack as well. It's a badass
Yeah.
soundtrack.
This is the second time you mentioned that. There must be something that they do strategically when they're creating these dramas, is trying to match music, thinking
I mean,
about the
that's
soundtrack. And
all soundtracks
yeah.
do. What was interesting for this one versus Red Sleeve is, like, Red Sleeve, the soundtrack on that is like 4 hours long.
Mhm.
So most of the songs were not repeated again and again. There's just, different moods, songs that fit this mood and this mood and this mood. Whereas Slave Hunters, it's just one CD soundtrack
Okay.
length. It's like 1 hour long, but there's this one song that's just repeated again and again and again and again and again. So you hear that song and you're like, oh shit, a fight's starting. And you're ready for it. Like,
Yeah,
what's
sure.
gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend this drama. I give it probably an A- overall. The ending was, I didn't like the ending. It was a sad ending. It was a very sad ending. You'll probably tear up a little bit at the end, not as much as Red Sleeve,
Yeah.
but you'll tear up a bit. And I was a bit disappointed. Like, I don't know why Korean shows so often just can't have a happy ending. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah,
Why
I know.
not?
I know.
And so there were a couple of parts that I was a
Yeah.
bit disappointed of. There was a couple of things in the middle that it's like, why is this happening here? But it was still a great show. I still recommend it. It's still addictive. We binged through it. It was very good. And this is a classic Korean sageuk drama.
Well, if you're watching a Korean drama and it's a happy ending, see how much time's left.
Right.
Someone's head might get lopped off at the last minute and a half or something.
Yeah,
But,
don't worry. We've still got time to kill your favorite character.
Yeah. Sounds
So
like a good one
anyway,
though.
the
What
Slave
is it called
Hunters.
again? What's
Yeah,
the name again?
Chuno, or the Slave Hunters.
Okay, the Slave Hunters.
I think if you
Chuno.
type Slave Hunters,
Okay.
it'll pull up. But yeah, I've also seen it CHUNO, Chuno, or in Hangul, of course, as well. Chuno.
So you said A-. That's, I would say that's either a triple or another in the park home run, if we use the baseball
Yeah.
metaphor.
No, this is definitely a good show overall.
Yeah.
There's, it's not perfect, but I really enjoyed it. I love Jung Hyuk, his acting still. He's probably one of my favorite Korean actors, at least in these sageuk dramas. Like the roles that he plays are just great. And yeah, it's hard to describe without me trying to do a terrible impression, which I will save you from.
You spared us. Yeah, these historical dramas are big business in Korea. They're huge. They're so popular.
Yeah.
So
And they're fun. They're good shows. There's so many good ones out there that they're fun to watch. And so this was a good one. It's a little old, but if you've got some time, check it out. It's worth it. It's worth your time.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Kev. Sounds awesome. I will definitely be
See you
checking
next
that
time.
out. Okay, next time.